The Umoja Village, a groundbreaking women only community in Kenya, was established in 1990 as a refuge for survivors of gender based violence in a bold rejection of patriarchal traditions. The Umoja model represents a reimagining of societal norms by creating a safe haven. However, its existence has not been without challenges, facing hostility from neighboring patriarchal communities and systemic inequalities. Despite these obstacles, the village has sparked conversations about gender roles, family structures, and the possibility of replicating similar models elsewhere. This roundtable discussion, organized by Nickel and Dime's Gender and Society Cluster, will explore the village's foundational principles, its transformative impact on gender dynamics, and its limitations while assessing its role as a catalyst for broader societal change in Kenya and beyond. So, my first question to all of you is what led to the establishment of this village, and what were the primary goals of the women who founded it? Any of you can just go ahead and then we can take turns.
I can take that up. Okay, so the Umoja village was established in 1990 in the Samburu district of northern Kenya by a group of 15 women initially, all of whom were survivors of rape by British soldiers. Now, the primary goal of its founder, Rebecca Lolosoli, was to create a safe space for women who had been subjected to gender-based violence, including forced child marriages, female genital mutilation, and domestic abuse. Now, Lola Soli conceived the idea while she herself was recovering in the hospital after being beaten for advocating for women's rights. The word Umoja means unity in Swahili, and it was designed as a refuge where women could protect and support one another, free from patriarchal oppression. Not only does it provide a safe haven for these women, it also provides economic support for them.
So the
Anything?
entire idea of like having this system was first of all to build a matriarchal society which would be free of men. Like the entire point of having this village was not to have any men in it because of all the oppression that they had suffered by men, which involved like women were basically their properties because at the ages of 16 and 14 they were sold off for merely by herds of cows and everything by their own families. So the village was set up to build community support around it so that women were there for each other, to have more women empowerment so that they could earn and fend for themselves as opposed to being mere chattels in the society, like in the Samburu village with their men. So it was a matriarchal community which was set up for better community engagement and helping each other out to fight the oppression they had suffered.
Yeah, so one thing which I found very interesting about the start of the matriarchal society is that the first 15 women who were in the village, as it was mentioned, that they were raped by some British soldiers who were stationed nearby. Now, the reason why they had to leave the tribe was also because it was considered that they brought in dishonor to their entire family and that they were tainted. And I feel like this particular perspective reflects like on so many societies, because this whole perspective of sexual violence bringing dishonor to the women's family, and that like now their honor is gone, etc. This is shared specifically by Indian society too, and like all around the world rape victims are like suffer from this perspective. So the universality of this like thing was really like worth reflecting upon.
Do any of you, Gauri and Soumya, do you have anything to add?
I think the entire concept, if you think about it theoretically, is very similar to a reading that I think a lot of us did in maybe Gen Soc called Sultana's Dream. And the entire concept is that, well, even in Sultana's Dream, women were very tired of the oppression that they were dealing and decided to just build a land where it was a very utopic idea of a world where you just, capture men and keep them in a place. And it's nice to see that some sort of it, something close to reality exists which was nice.
I would also like to add on to Gauri's point, whereas the idea of a women only village is very free and a new concept, but at the same time, it's also very sad that in a world where genders are supposed to coexist, you can only be truly free when you are like homogeneous.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. How does the Umoja model differ from traditional patriarchal communities in Kenya?
Can I take
So
that up?
the
Oh, okay.
So the Umoja model is a matriarchal community where the women govern themselves, own property, work, and make leadership decisions, as opposed to traditional societies which are mainly patriarchal, especially the Kenya ethnic group, where the women are considered inheritable properties and their marriages and all major life making decisions are governed by men, and the only promotion to leadership positions are of men only. Most women as undermined as people and are treated as chattel, and they're not allowed to inherit land or even govern their own life decisions. However, in the Umoja model, they're free, they're able to make their own decisions. They advocate against child marriages, which is very common in the Kenya ethnic community, where they're made to marry men who are several decades older than them and are free from the abuse of domestic violence and just mainly oppression from men.
One specific difference is also that in the Samburu village, the idea of circumcision is very like important amongst like men and women both, but it's really ignored as to how difficult and how different the implications are for women's circumcision, which is the basically female genital mutilation, as opposed to the male circumcision, which after it's performed, men are considered as warriors and they're supposed to protect the village, as opposed to the fact that whenever women go through something in their village, they never protect those women. And in the Umoja model, they have constantly advocated against FGM by saying that this is not how it's supposed to be. It's extremely harmful for a woman's health. So this is also something, especially in Africa, where this has been a fight for a very long time against FGM. So having a village just for women wherein they have fought for something like this, especially when Rebecca herself went through FGM at a very young age. So this was a stark difference in between the ideologies of both the villages.
To basically like sum it up, the very practices of child marriage, FGM, and rape, uh, domestic violence, everything which the Umoja tribe is against, is practiced, in fact, promoted in Samburu tribe, the tribe which the first 15 inhabitants were originally from. And another thing is that even though there is a matriarch in the Umoja like tribe, they still follow a very much horizontal decision making system where they at least try to get on a consensus on the major decisions, like basically the majority system.
I think this is really interesting because when we usually think about matriarchal societies, we have a very optimistic view at it. But a lot of matriarchal societies in India itself actually have a lot of patriarchal practices within them. I think a tribe I think in the East was where I think women's property is passed down in a matriarchal way. However, preference is still given to the woman's brother or the woman's although the property stays within the female family, it is managed by men despite being a matriarchal way of living. So I was really happy to hear or see that the same isn't practiced in this village, considering how even within matriarchal communities there can be patriarchal concepts. And the whole horizontal way, as I think Fairy talked about, was an interesting way of, because in usually there is some sort of oppression in any community. So I was, this was interesting. Yeah.
I would add to like that they also teach gender equality in their education, especially when gender equality as a concept is very far away from their own environment and society they live. They advocate for gender equality. And one more interesting thing that I read was that even though the village is a woman only community, however, it's not like the women have stopped their association with men completely because there are still children being born. So it is clear that the women do have some relationship with men, however, it is outside of the village. So I feel that speaks quite a lot.
Yeah, one parallel I can draw with India is the tussle between written codified law and customary practices. So while Kenyan law technically grants women equal property rights, customary practices deny them ownership. So women actually own less than 2% of title land in Kenya, and the Umoja village is trying to change that. They're trying to grant property rights to women in the village.
About this thing about the Kenyan constitution, which Meghna said, it is also really important to know that obviously in like Samburu tribe, women did not own property, but even like the Umoja women, the property which they had lived on for so many years, they still had to fight a lot to actually gain ownership over like that property, which was another struggle which they had. Also, can I
Okay,
say
thank
one
you.
more thing?
Yeah, sure, go
It's
ahead.
about someone was talking about how like they teach gender equality to children. Now I read somewhere, maybe some of you also came across of it, when they were asked about like the boys who were also living with them. Like one of the members, it's some article which I read, they said that well, it's like it's not too late for them. Like they can still learn about gender equality, they can still learn to respect women's rights, which I found like really nice that it's very like easy to build after what they've suffered. It's very easy that they can build resentment against just all mankind, but they still know that like okay, no one is born evil, and they're still planning on incorporating equality, equity ideas into like the to be men.
Yeah, I think it all starts from, the home and school and, from a young age. So I completely agree with you. Um, my next question is, what role does the Umoja village play in providing safety and empowerment for its women? And how does it sustain itself economically and socially?
Should I take that up? Now, one of the main ways that I know, like, there are a couple sources of income, but one of the main ways that they earn is through making and selling accessories. They, in fact, their accessories are also available online, and they sell it to like all over the world, and it's a major source of income. They also go to a nearby like national reserve to like sell their jewelry. Now, maybe it's kind of controversial that it happens, but the village has also turned into sort of a tourist attraction where they charge a fee, and then the tourist can sort of like view like the village and like see how things work. It's controversial because now like people are worried it may dilute the culture, and they may have to like whatever the tourists like, they'll sort of like lean and behave towards that. So that's another controversial thing. Another way is through donations by international organizations. There are many NGOs and like many international organizations that work. They not only give donations, they also help promote like they also help in the functioning of the schools of Umoja. That is like another way of like sustaining themselves.
I think the method of taxation that they apply is quite interesting about how every woman there, a certain portion of her earnings are donated as tax to schools for which then further employs equality and gender education, which I think is really interesting. It's a very self-sustaining way of making sure that um, that the future generations are have access to a lot of the things that they don't, which is pretty nice.
Another thing worth mentioning is that it is the village's matriarch that allocates the funds for foods based on how many children like a woman has. And another thing is, though, like we were talking about dilution, etc., etc., right? So, like even though they sell their they sell accessories, necklaces, and all that, they like the colors and designs of the beads of the jewelry are often symbolic, like which convey social status and wealth, etc., etc. So like any request which there may be for like headpieces or collar necklaces, they don't entertain that. That is to preserve their identity, because it is sort of an extension of their culture and tradition.
Very well put. Does anyone have anything else you guys want to add, or should I move on to the next question? Because I think everything's been summed up pretty well.
I would like to add another thing.
Yeah,
I'm
go
really
ahead.
sorry. I just keep on remembering things. Like through the help of NGOs, they have also been able to like make a well in the village, and they also earn through selling water to to neighboring tribes, and then it also helps in their agricultural endeavors.
Very well put. The next question is, what are some of the external challenges that the village would face from neighboring communities and also like other authorities?
So one of the challenges is from the men of the Samburu village itself, who keep entering, who have threatened the matriarch itself and beaten her up for coming up with this idea. So there has been a lot of struggles in the initiation of this this model in itself, and she suffered a lot of threats, violence by the hand of the external existence of the same men who were probably a part of their clan, their family. So that is one thing, that suffering oppression from the neighboring villages when it comes to like their harassment or even land disputes, reclaiming the land that they have set up their village on. And one of the major things that these women were accused of by the neighboring men or their families were that they are breaking up traditions that belong to Kenya, and how basically they have broken up families as well and not abided by what their culture is supposed to stay. And on a regular basis, they've also been constantly said that women can never be leaders. So that is one thing that they've constantly faced. By other authorities, mostly there have been land disputes, administrative disputes, that they never really got the land funds, which also led to their collapse later on. That there was a major problem with corruption also, that the funds that were actually theirs, or the government that gave them the funds, were not being utilized for that village, and which caused a lot of disruptions and administrative issues. There were a lot of problems with regards to land disputes, wherein they were accused of not having the legal right to their land, and there was no support from local level governments as well. And one more thing, like with COVID-19, the tourism had also suffered, and since their main, the fact that they earned through tourism, that really took a back foot, because there was no tourism, and sustaining themselves economically would have became really difficult.
I would
With
like to mention, like, it's very small as compared to what Arsha has mentioned, but like the men from the neighboring communities, they steal their cattle, they set up competing businesses, and they also discourage tourists from visiting. From what I feel is that this is also their voice in opposition of a change that is coming, and to show that women cannot bring a change, they cannot lead, and that they cannot sustain themselves. So that it is also a resistance to change, which is very natural in every human being.
when
Yeah, I
like
also read that. Sorry. Yeah, I also read that previously the founder, Rebecca Lolusoli, she was faced with very violent threats from her husband, who allegedly confronted her with a gun after learning about the income that she was earning through Umoja. But thankfully, she was able to secure legal representation, and she successfully petitioned Samburu court, if I'm not wrong, for protection. And this resulted in an injunction that prohibited him from entering the village. But obviously, the insecurity and the uncertainty will remain for the women in Umoja.
Like about the point on like the threat which Lala Sali faced with her husband, there are many men who sometimes come to the village to demand their wives back. And even though now it has sort of turned into a norm, like amongst the tribes, to leave these women alone, previously this used to happen a lot. So the women would actually take turns staying awake at night so that they would be able to like guard their tribe. And also I learned that they have like a river encircling their village, which like helps, which provides like a guard against the men who like, who make a men, and also like it protects them from like wildfire and like animals and everything.
Okay, it was very interesting to hear what you guys thought were some of the challenges that these women would face. I think we can end with in what ways has the Umoja village inspired or influenced similar initiatives in other regions? Just to end on a more positive note.
I think there's a community of Kurdish women called Jinwar, which is very similar to matriarchal concepts that have been employed under um, the Moja village. Like they follow similar ideals. And even I think closer to home, there are many tribes here. Like I think the Khaso and the Khalsi and Garo tribe in Meghalaya, which follow similar concepts. Obviously, I think since I'm a bit more well versed with the Indian ones, I do understand that there are loopholes within even matriarchal communities. And but I'm not sure if the same applies to Mojo Village.
One that I came across was Nueva do Cordeiro. It is in it is formed in 1981, 1891, and it has a population of 600 women. It was created by women who were accused of adultery and excommunicated by the church. So they wanted to create a space where women are not controlled by men. So this adultery, I feel, is very special because it shows not only the helplessness of women in an oppressed environment, but it also shows how their helplessness is being used by the same people who made them that way to then exclude them and banish
Another example is in the Egyptian village of Al Samaha, wherein it was created in 1998. One stark difference between Umoja and this village is that the Egyptian village was actually created by the government itself, by I think the Ministry of Agriculture. So that makes a very big difference when the state gets involved in making something which is specifically for women, as opposed to in Kenya, wherein the women had to take everything in their own hands from the very first step without any involvement from the authorities. So I think the Umoja inspired the government of some other like place and to help create a village where, in this case, in the Egyptian village, there were divorcees and widows and even domestic abuse survivors, and their sustainability was taken care of. Especially of those whose husbands were lost in wars and they had to fend for themselves and their children. So that is one inspiring story.
In Kenya itself, Umoja has inspired many similar initiatives, and some of them have been started by women who previously lived in Umoja. Like one example is the Tumai village, or Tumai, I think that's how you pronounce it, and that is also women only village. They are completely self-sufficient and they perform tasks which men perform. They're against practices like FGM, and decisions are taken by a majority vote. Like they have divorcees, like etc. etc. And like boys are permitted there, but only up until the age of 16, and then they have to leave. And another product of Umoja's influence is Nachami, and that system is like inspired by Umoja, but it is actually like, but it has turned it, like, the system into its own way, as in like what is suitable and convenient for them, in the sense that men do live there, like men live in that village, but they have to live there, the men must reject like traditional Samburu principles, and they need to agree to live a life with like a new thinking if they actually wish to live in Nachami. So that I found very interesting.
Yeah, I think as Gauri said, that there are loopholes to everything, and I think when it comes to gender equality as well, it's almost like a never-ending process of reform, and we're continually redefining what it means to be truly equal. And Yeah, I think it is nice to see so many steps forward being taken by so many different women, but I think it's also important to look at uh, in what ways are we also taking a step back at the same time. But it was really nice to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in and telling us all your thoughts. Yeah, thank you so much.